In this recording today, I want to speak about managing political relationships. And I have 3 big points to make. The first one, managing political relations with individual countries is the essence of diplomatic work. What does that mean? It means that you reach out to a particular country, you engage them through your own embassy in that country and that country's reciprocal embassy in your own capital. You explore with them cooperation possibilities, signing of new agreements, new protocols, new arrangements, which meets the requirements of both countries. For example, you may decide to have an agreement on the avoidance of double taxation, or you may have a protocol that covers the export of, say, fruits and vegetables from that country into your country or vice versa. Now, vegetable products, fruits, are subject to tight international controls, what are called phytosanitary controls, in order to avoid the spread of plant disease. So there is a special system for them. These are examples of the kind of agreements that countries sign. Or you may decide to send students from one country to the other, give them scholarships, give them facilities. You may carry out cultural programs. You may carry out a program of scientific cooperation. The possibilities are infinite. And in our globalized age, there are more and more opportunities, requirements that come up for this kind of cooperation. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi used to say that maintaining a relationship with a country is like nourishing a plant. You have to water it from time to time. Sometimes you may have to remove weeds. Sometimes you may have to turn the soil. All this in order to keep a good relationship running even better. Sometimes problems come up between countries. There may be a consular problem involving, say, somebody who has carried out nefarious activities in your own country and has fled to the other country. So you need then to try and extradite that person, bring that person back. Many other examples are available. Basically, countries try to use the political relationship as a platform for other forms of cooperation. Now, usually the political relationship is a given. It's usually a good relationship, but you constantly strive to make it better. My second big point is the role of heads of government in diplomacy and in the work of foreign ministries. Why is this important? Because international affairs, by its nature, involves leaders to play a direct role. This was not always the case. 50, 70 years ago, leaders of countries met infrequently. They hardly traveled abroad. You had leaders who had maybe made 2 or 3 journeys in a year in the 30s or even in the early 50s. But all that changed with the growth in international exchanges, globalization, economic exchanges, and so many other events. Today, the agenda at the United Nations is crowded with many, many topics, and leaders attend conferences round the year. A typical leader in India or Indonesia or Brazil perhaps participates in anywhere from 6 to 10 meetings held in foreign countries in any year. These may be meetings of the G20 group, these may be UN mandated meetings. And you know, even in New York, the annual session of the United Nations, which opens in the last week of September, has now by tradition, by new tradition, become an event where 70, 80 leaders from different countries congregate to discuss, to hold bilateral discussions, to hold group discussions, and essentially to engage one another. Now, when it comes to foreign ministries, leaders supervise foreign ministries in a way that is unique. No other ministry, even a finance ministry or a defense ministry, has the president, the executive president of a country, say in France, in the US, in China, in Russia, or Brazil, or in the case of countries like India, UK, Germany, it would be the Prime Minister, or with the Germans, the Chancellor. These are the heads of government. And the heads of government and their staff, their offices, are in constant, daily, sometimes hourly discussion with the foreign ministry, contact with the foreign ministry. This is because, as I said a moment back, leaders are directly involved in international affairs. This has consequences, and we'll talk about this in another episode, where I plan to talk a little more about the work of foreign ministries. My third point that I want to make to you is the way in which the work of foreign ministries has changed in relation to other agencies. We can think of the official actors and non-official actors. Let's first take the official agencies. Today, every ministry conducts its own external activities. A health ministry is in constant touch with the World Health Organization. Right now, in the face of the terrible virus crisis, the COVID crisis, every foreign health ministry is in hourly contact with WHO. The Labour Ministry talks to other labour ministries and to ILO, the International Labour Organization. The Ministry of Telecom, which also probably handles internet affairs, is in touch with WTO, the World Telecom Organization. So, the foreign ministry has to coordinate with all these ministries. How does it do that? When I was researching a book that looked at the diplomacy of Asian countries, I remember more than one Chinese diplomat telling me some 15, 18 years ago that from the foreign ministry we issue instructions to other ministries on what they should do. This was a little amusing because the simple fact is that every ministry is autonomous. No ministry accepts instructions from a foreign ministry. What I felt was that my Chinese friends had perhaps not quite understood the way of working with other ministries. There are scholars who say that 50, 40 years ago, foreign ministries were gatekeepers. That is, they went by a particular provision of the Vienna Convention of 1961, which actually says that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will be the prime channel of contact for embassies. It is no longer a prime channel. That particular provision of the Vienna Convention has died away. Every ministry is in direct contact with embassies. And embassies, in turn, are in constant communication with 20, 30 different ministries. And nobody has time to go to the foreign ministry and say, shall we send this message to XYZ ministry? So how does the foreign ministry manage in this situation? It has to try and play the role of a coordinator. The ultimate goal for every country is to deliver a whole of government foreign policy. It can't be the foreign policy of the finance ministry or the defense ministry or the ministry of water resources. For example, if you are building dams in the neighboring country, that's very important. It's important to you, it's important to the other country. But then that hydroelectric project also has consequences on your total relationship, say between Nepal and India, between Bhutan and India. The foreign ministry has to ensure that the work carried out by the line ministry, as they are called, the functional ministry, fits into the larger schema of foreign affairs. And that is what we mean by whole of government foreign policy. Easy to say, very difficult to deliver, because every ministry will have its own agenda. Rightly, the foreign ministry has to try and make sure that it coordinates that agenda with the national foreign policy agenda. Easy to say, much harder to do. A brilliant British diplomat called Tom Fletcher wrote a report in London for the British Foreign Ministry, they call it the Foreign Office, which is called the Future FCO. And a part of that report is devoted to how the Foreign Office works with other ministries, which the British call Whitehall. The British have slightly quaint terminology of their own. And Tom Fletcher says in his recommendations, which were accepted by the British Foreign Office and by the government, he says, we cannot be the chair of every discussion on environmental issues or on internet governance issues, but we must have a place at the table. That is the key. The foreign ministry must be a participant in major decision making on trade issues, on financial agreements, on defense cooperation, and a myriad of activities without being the leader. And it must be able to coordinate. A big challenge. The other large cluster of new actors who play a major role in foreign affairs are what are called the non-state actors. These include business, chambers of commerce, chambers of industry, think tanks, research institutes, academia, science and technology entities, NGOs that work on development, NGOs that deal with international issues. Well, it's a very large range of actors. And it is a very difficult job for any foreign ministry to harmonize actions with them, because they have different agendas. And rightly, they will tell the foreign ministry that, look, you run the national policy, but we are an autonomous entity. We don't have to do everything you want us to do. So the foreign ministry has to be a persuader with these agencies. It has to say, you tell us what you think we should do. That's a brilliant way of working with other people. Rather than demanding that you do this, you can say an environmental organization doing fine work at home, engage with its partners in dialogue across the globe. But when it comes to a major environment conference, it is now the practice that official delegations take with them non-officials as participants, as full delegation members who have a right to advise the government. This is the best way in which the country moves from what I call a whole of government policy to a whole of national policy. That's a wonderful objective to work for, not easy to achieve, but it's something that we can talk about. Thank you. I will continue with this in the next conversation, which I hope will focus on the work of the Foreign Ministry. Thank you.